Hey guys, welcome back to Tethan Props. Today I'm going to do a build tutorial on my Darth Maul skull. So I was scrolling through Instagram one day and I came across a photo, and it was from a skull that someone had painted with the Darth Maul's face patterns all over it, and I thought it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So I decided to make one myself. This was a pretty straightforward build because there was a lot of 3D printing that went into this, and 3D printing, yes, it can be troublesome but it's a lot easier than making stuff by hand. So difficulty wise, I'd give it maybe about a 2 out of 5 lightsabers, so really not that difficult, but it was a pretty fun build, so let's get into how I made it. So this was a full-size skull, which I scaled down to I think about 0.75, because I didn't want a full-size skull, I just wanted a nice small display piece. So to print this, it was in 2 pieces and is at about 20% infill, so it's pretty strong. If you drop it, it's not going to break, and the printing time for it was about 16 hours. So to join the 2 separate halves together, I just used super glue, and I found that before I try and glue it, it's always better to sand down the 2 surfaces, especially if the gluing surface is a surface that is on the base of the printing machine, because then it gets a really nice smooth base if you print it on there, and it's more difficult for it to glue because you need the glue for something to grab onto. So I sand down the 2 sides, put super glue on them and glued them and held them together until they were set. So this wasn't the smoothest thing when it came out of the printer because you get the registration lines from the 3D printing. So to fix that, I first sanded the whole thing down a lot. That takes a very long time because this is PLA, so it's not the most sandable plastic, but it still eventually gets there. So to make it even smoother on top of that, I just sprayed it with a filler putty, which we'd use for painting cars and things like that. So that really fills in all the little divots and the little lines and everything. So there's a bit of a noticeable line between the 2 halves of the skull. So to fill those in, I just took some Bondo, filled it into the gaps, and then once that was dried and set, then I sanded it back down. So to make the horns, I did these out of just EVA foam. I was going to 3D print them all, but I thought it would be good if I made them all by hand because then they're all slightly different, and there are a few different types of horns that he has, and it just gives it a more organic feel if they're not all exactly the same. So I just took some EVA foam, glued it into little blocks, and then went ahead with my knife and just cut out the general shape of them. I then went back with my Dremel tool and worked on the final dimensions that I wanted for the horns. And all the horns have these kind of grains going throughout them. So to do those, I simply just cut the lines in with a knife and then went over with my heat gun. Because when you have cuts in EVA foam and you heat them up with a heat gun, so like 300 degrees Celsius, it separates the foam and makes nice little grooves in the foam for you. So Darth Maul's horns, where they connect to the skull, there's a little bit of a raised area there. So to do that, I just took some hot glue and did a bead around the outside of the horn. Once all the horns were in place and I was happy with the way they were, it was then time to start painting overall. So the first layer of paint was just a simple primer, and then I went back with a gloss black over the entire skull. So once the black was dried, then I went and put on all my red. So just going off reference photos, I just decided where I wanted all the red to be, and then just went with simple acrylic paint and painted that all on. The extra black parts that are around, especially on the front here, they were all just put on with Sharpie. So I was going to do that by painting it, but it was always going to be a lot more accurate to just draw them on with Sharpie, and it looks exactly the same. The horns were painted with acrylic paints, so they were just painted with light browns, yellows and whites, so just give it a nice bony colour. The horns were then weathered with a bit of black and a bit of brown, so it got it really into all the nice grains that I've put in there, and then washed most of it off to leave the black grains and the bony coloured bone. The teeth I painted the same as the bones, so that was just, again, a lot of yellows and whites and light browns, and then went back with the weathering to kind of dirty them up a lot. Once all the painting was done, then I just coated it in a clear coat of satin. So that just seals in all the paint that you've done and makes sure it doesn't rub off when you're holding it. So it was a nice kind of added addition to this Darth Maul skull. I thought it would be good to make half of his lightsaber, because we all know that in The Phantom Menace he gets his lightsaber cut in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I thought that at the bottom of the well, or whatever the chute he falls down, it'd be kind of cool if his skull and half his lightsaber sat down there together. So to make the lightsaber, it's simply just a PVC pipe with a lot of layers of thin 2mm thick EVA foam and a bit of 1mm thick EVA foam. And the buttons are just screws that I've painted. So that was a really simple, quick build, only took a couple hours, if that. Most of the time is spent just waiting for the paint to dry. So there we have it, my Darth Maul skull and half of his lightsaber that got cut in half. Hope you enjoyed this build, guys. Feel free to subscribe to my channel, like my Facebook page, like my Instagram page, all those kind of things. I'll put all the links below. But thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.